Steamboat around the bend, it's a steamboat on the red. Whistle on ahead, got a steamboat on the red, red river. Steamboat on the red, red river. Steamboat on the red, red river.
Looking at the Red River as it twists and turns its way north across the prairie to Lake Winnipeg, it's hard to imagine that from 1859 to 1909, it carried millions of tons of goods and thousands of passengers on massive paddle wheel steamboats.
Just the idea of these big 120, 130 foot long steamboats, big building sized vessels plying the little tiny stream that we have here, just amazes people.
It's an interesting river. It's like a lot of prairie rivers. It's meandering and shallow and very, very turbid. The Red River water is often just sort of slightly liquefied mud.
So what would drive hard-headed 19th century businessmen to try to make this winding, twisty, shallow river into a superhighway? Money.
Until 1858, the Hudson's Bay Company received and sent all of their fur trade goods and their furs back and forth across the North Atlantic from England by sailing vessels. It was a long, expensive, and dangerous route. The storms were a constant threat in the North Atlantic. Icebergs in Hudson Bay. Hudson Bay is only free of ice for a few months out of the year, a small window of opportunity to get their materials in and out. But the Hudson's Bay Company had been watching these Métis people up at the Forks for decades, had been trading with St. Paul traders. And they said, well, we can try that.
With an eye on the bottom line, Hudson's Bay Company Governor Sir George Simpson brought a test shipment from England using the Minnesota route. The shipment came into New York and traveled by railroad and steamboat to St. Paul, where it was loaded onto Red River ox carts. The ox carts then made the trek across open prairie to Fort Garry. Instead of a year, it took only 6 months and was a fraction of the cost. But although the Minnesota route was faster and easier, it was no walk in the park.
To get there, you went through miles upon miles upon miles of tall prairie grass, and it was definitely a frontier.
It had not been drained. Much of it was much muddier and boggier than it is now. The main barrier was getting through the mud holes.
But even with the primitive condition of the ox cart trails, trade between St. Paul and Hudson's Bay Company began to flourish. But both were always on the lookout for a way to decrease their costs and increase their profits.
If you are going to move freight, or for that matter, if you're going to move people, the cheapest, fastest way of doing it is by water.
In 1858, these St. Paul merchants commissioned a fellow to make a survey of the Red River Valley and the river specifically to evaluate whether it was feasible to place steam navigation on the river. There were no railroads close to the Red River at that time, of course, and they just saw it as a means of conveying a lot more goods up to what is now Manitoba than could be accomplished via the ox cart. It was an opportunity that they felt they wanted to investigate. And the fellow who did the survey came back and said, yes, I think you can run steamboats for 3 to 4 months a year, and it can be a feasible thing.
So after Blakely's reconnaissance, then you have the nice little problem of how do you get a steamboat to the Red River?
The St. Paul Chamber of Commerce offered a prize of $1,000 to the first person to launch an operating steamboat on the Red. That's about $26,000 today. No takers. Finally, one enterprising businessman proposed a bold plan to claim the prize.
A guy named Anson Northup had a little boat called the North Star on the upper Mississippi River, north of what's now Brainerd. And during that winter, he disassembled his boat at Crow Wing, loaded it onto a sledge, and used about 40 brace of oxen.
Unfortunately for Northup, the winter of 1859 was extremely harsh.